Hello, this is Rob from failedmuso.com. Welcome along to my review of the UVI Darklight IIx sample library. And let's get the technical stuff out of the way first. This is a sample library for the UVI Workstation plugin, which is a free download from uvi.net. You can download the plugin, takes about 150, 170 of your megabytes, and is available in Mac and Windows 32 and 64-bit variants. The library itself is about 2.16 gigabytes in size, is also downloadable and purchased from uvi.net. You will also need an iLock key to authorize the use of this sample library, and those can be picked up around 35 to 40 pounds. That's GBP from most music retailers, and anywhere else around the world they're around the same sort of price. So that's the technical stuff out of the way. Let's give you a bit of background about Darklight IIx. Well, there's no mistaking where they got the inspiration for this sample library from, and certainly where they got the samples from is quite clearly a Fairlight CMI 2X, which of course, if you are regular readers of my blog, you'll know that I'm slightly obsessed with. So this, of course, piqued my interest once the lovely Elizabeth at UVI sent me an email a little while ago and said, "This is our new product, and would you like to test it, and would you like to do a review?" And yes, thank you. So thank you, Elizabeth, for that. And it is a really, really fulsome library of Fairlight sounds. UVI go a long way. In fact, they go all the way in avoiding using the word Fairlight in the product, because it's not associated, affiliated, approved or sponsored by in any way the Fairlight company, either Fairlight US or Fairlight Instruments. What this is an extensive sample library. It is not a replication of a Fairlight in software. That is currently technologically not possible without serious amounts of additional DSP power, and that's the very reason why the CMI 30A came into existence a little while ago, when Peter Vogel, the original inventor of the Fairlight, said that with current technology just doing it in software won't cut it. You need serious DSP power to recreate the at the time cutting edge hardware that was used in the Fairlight, to give you all the nuances and the mistakes and the errors that kind of coloured the Fairlight sound. And we'll talk a little bit about how it did that a little bit later on. So this is a sample library, plain and simple, nothing more, but it's a sample library done by UVI, which means that it's going to have a really nice interface. It's going to look the part, and it's going to be very easy to get into and mess around with, because UVI, if they do anything really well, they do their interfaces very well indeed. So without further ado, let's have a look at the library itself. You'll notice first of all that we are running version 2.0.6 of the UVI Workstation, and you're going to need this version. It's a free download, but you're going to need to upgrade to 2.0.6 if you haven't got this already, because UVI have installed a new plugin, a new FX plugin within the framework of the Workstation, which is called Sparkle Verb and is used extensively throughout this library. So you're going to need that. So go and download that first, and then you can purchase the library from uvi.net, and then get the authorization installed onto your iLock key, and you're good to go. So let's go into the browser, and it's a typical browser that apes the kind of the Mac version, the Mac way of doing file searching. And once we click on Darklight, we've got these three pages. Now, if you're not familiar with the concept of a Fairlight, the functionality within a CMI 2X was categorized on the main screen through a selection of pages. So you had, for example, page R was the sequencing page, and then there was another page for waveform editing, there was another page for sampling, another page for the additive synthesis that came with the Fairlight, that it was less known for than the sampling. So what UVI have done here is they've tipped a nod to the old Fairlight itself, and they've called each section a page, which is nice. It's kind of nostalgic and fun. So we've got page P, and that is your instruments. So if you click on there, you'll see the categories of instruments, and then we click on the category, and then we're presented with all the instruments in that particular folder. Page B is a Beatbox section to the tool, and gives you 8 16-step sequences, and each of those sequences can have a percussive or drum sound assigned to it. You can then program the 16 steps, and there are note on, note off, and a mid-velocity note on as well. You've got independent controls for each of those lanes, and you can build up some nice drum patterns in there. We'll show you that in a bit. And then you've got page U, which is the pattern and phrase sequencer. Again, this is something we've seen in other UVI libraries, but this, of course, has got a nice Fairlight style interface and allows you to take 3 sounds, layer them, and use step sequencers to trigger different arpeggiations and notes and effects, and then you can then play those chromatically across the keyboard. And it's a really useful tool, and it's a tool that I like to use just to mess around and get a bit of inspiration, if I'm trying to come up with something. Anyway, let's crack on with page P and have a look at some of the sounds here. So, as we say, you go in, you choose your category, and then you're presented with a host of sounds. So let's have a look and double click on some of these and go through. So here's one particular sound. Slightly wrong note at the bottom end there, but never mind, you get the idea. There's some very recognizable sounds in here. For example, if we go to Fair Voices, we all know and we'll all be very familiar with this particular sound. And that's on the Fairlight was called Sarah or Sarah. Basically, it was a lady called Sarah whose voice was sampled, and they called it Sarah. Very clever. But on here, it's called The Fair Voice. And again, UVI have steered clear of any kind of copyright issues here in terms of the names. So, and one of the things I really like that they've done with these samples is they've retained as much of the colorization that the original Fairlight gave a lot of its sounds. And let me explain what I mean by that. In the early days of the Fairlight, the sample time, the sample memory was very, very small. So you only had a very small sample memory to play with, and you could only have one sample per instrument. And so that sample had to be stretched up and down the keyboard. So if you sampled it here, say at the root note of C3, then you had to stretch that sound to cover all the key range up to here, and of course all the way down as well. And when you do that with a sample, you effectively speed the sample playback up, or you slow the sample playback down. And when you do that, the sound starts to become unfamiliar and starts to degrade as well. So Peter and Kim, the co-inventors of the Fairlight, came up with some really clever hardware and configurations of software that kind of anticipated these issues and tried to correct them as much as possible. I'm trying to give you this in layman's terms without getting too technical. So the hardware inside the Fairlight tried to shift the sound smoothly and make it sound as good as it could across the whole of the keyboard. So if we play the original Sarah sample here, or the Fair Voice, and that's around the sort of root note of the sample. Sounds okay. But once we start getting right down the lower end of the register, you can hear that it sounds a bit gritty, a bit rough. There's digital artifacts and aliasing going on. Now, I'm not sure how well this is going to come through after YouTube compression, but if you play that note, you can hear that not only is you've got the note, but you've also got a very high-pitched kind of whistle in the background. It's probably the best way to describe it. And that's digital artifacts and aliasing going on there that you just can't avoid. And it's really nice that UVI have managed to capture this and make it sound like it's coming from a real Fairlight. Now, don't get me wrong, nothing sounds quite like a real Fairlight than a real Fairlight. It's one of those things that it really can only sound just like that. And this is, this hasn't got anything whizzy going on in terms of software processing. This is purely samples going through the UVI Workstation wrapper, but they've managed to capture a lot of the quality of the original samples. So these do retain the character, and it was that character that makes the Fairlight still very desirable to this day. So let's see what other voices we've got in here. We've got choir voices, obviously. A lot of these and there's all sorts of stuff in here. Again, I'm always I wish I could do just a video of playing every single sound, because there are some really good ones in here, but we just don't have the time to go through them all. Let's go to Orchestral Hits, because obviously the Fairlight was very well known for certain orchestral hits, and this one was one in particular. Now here's an interesting story. I'll just throw this in very quickly. That is commonly known as Orc 5, and that was the name of the sample apparently on the Fairlight itself. Now, about 18 months ago, I did some work with Fairlight Instruments and helped out on their iOS application. And one of the other jobs that Peter Vogel got me to do was to look into the history of some of these sounds, and I was convinced that was called Orc 5 because everyone else was, and there's even academic papers written about that particular sample, how it was created from Stravinsky's Firebird Suite. Peter himself told me the story of how he sampled that sound and how it then went on to become, one of the most famous sounds in popular music. And when we researched the library, we actually got hold of original Fairlight IIx factory discs, and on the discs this sound was actually called Orc 2. And so for so many years the legend, the myth has built up around Orc 5, and actually it was called Orc 2. So there you go, small little known fact for you, and that has been verified by the inventor of the Fairlight himself, Peter Vogel. Another great Fairlight orchestral hit that is very popular is this one, and we all know that one. That's from Owner of a Lonely Heart. Trevor Horn, obviously a very big user of this. Here's another use of it you might recognise. Art of Noise fans will know that as well, because obviously that comes from the Cripson Factor theme, and many others thrown in there for good measure. So let's have a look, see if we can find out some more sounds that are going on in here that are very interesting. Another one that I really like is P. Wang. This was used quite predominantly by Peter Gabriel. I think it was Rhythm of the Night. And many others. I love that sound, I really do. That I could play with that one all day. What else have we got? Strings, lots of strings. And the Fairlight strings were always, they had that character to them. Kate Bush used these cellos a lot, especially in the Hounds of Love album. What else have we got in here? There's some nice pads, and there are some nice new sounds as well. They're not just sampled the library and been done with it. They've actually gone and created some new sounds. Some really nice stuff in here. They've done a really good job again with their patch programming. And let's have a look at the actual patches themselves and see how they go. This, if you're familiar with UVI stuff, and if you've watched any of my other UVI review videos, then all of this will be incredibly familiar. All they've actually done is they've just given it this green on black effect, which doesn't replicate the Fairlight screen in any way, apart from there's some nice little visual cues like these solid green bars at the top. They're kind of very Fairlighty, and just the colours. But it's nice, it's nostalgic, and it brings a little smile to one's face. So what we have here, we have the amplitude envelope, we have the filter envelope, and the filter settings here at the top, and we can assign velocity to attack on the amp envelope, and we can do velocity to sensitivity on the filter. So the harder you hit it, the bigger the opening of the filter, and same here, the harder you hit it, the harder the attack. We've got over here the mod wheel assignments, and again, as with most UVI instruments, you can assign the mod wheel to vibrato, tremolo, and filter, and you can just turn those on. You can have any combination or all three. It's entirely up to you, and then you've got different rates and depths here. So that makes the mod wheel a pretty powerful controller as well. Pitch envelope, overdrive, which just basically gives it a bit of oomph and grittiness. We've got the stereo function here, so we can have no stereo enhancement. We can have this alternating enhancement where each note hit appears somewhere slightly different in the stereo field, and we can mess around with the field here with the spread controls. And then we've got this universal stereo where it just sits there in a fixed place. Over on the right hand side here, we have these virtually hardwired controls which will apply to every instrument. That's phaser, delay, reverb and bit crusher, and all of these feed into the UVI Workstation effects rack, which you can access up here. And there you go. You can insert any effects that you like in here as well. And so you've got all of these in here, and they all come supplied with the UVI Workstation as standard. So there you go. Let's have a quick look at some more sounds. We've got some strings here. Now, I'm not sure you can pick up this again with the YouTube audio. I'm not a massive fan, but you can hear even up here. There's noise in the background. There's aliasing going on. This, they've retained the quality as much as it can be through sampling. I've done a lot of sampling myself, and I've been in the presence of one of the great masters of sampling, Steve Howell, and I've gone through that process of picking these things up and trying to make them sound really authentic, and they've done a fantastic job here. I could go on forever through all of these sounds. Some really nice sounds in here. I'll just show you some of these as I just quickly flick through. Lots of nice effect sounds in here, so if you're into that kind of thing. I mean, there are some really cheesy things going on here, and you'll probably never use them. Then again, you might. It might be your bag. But there's some really nice sounds. The woodwinds are always nice on the Fairlight, especially with that grittiness that the machine gives it. Some nice synth sounds on here, and so on and so forth. There you go. That's page P with all the musical instruments. Let's have a look at page B, which is the Beatbox. Now, this is a single one-load process, so we double-click on page B, and here we have the screen. Now, again, you can, if you're a Fairlight user or you're familiar with the Fairlight, you'll recognise the layout of this screen, or where they got the inspiration for the layout of this screen. And it's a kind of replication of the page R sequencer page. So what you actually have here are 8 lanes, and in each of these lanes you can choose from, as you can see, a massive amount of drum and percussion samples, and we've got loads, as you can see. So you can see the depth that they've gone to here in terms of sounds. There's a lot going on, and you can choose any one of those and drop them into the slots there. And you've got a volume control here, and you've also got a mute, so you can turn that off there. You've each got a pan and tune control, and over here on the far right you've got the filter. So each lane has its own filter, so you can open and close the filter between low pass and high pass. So that gives you a bit more control over the sound. And then it's a case of clicking and dropping your notes in, and if you click on an empty slot, you'll notice the note drops in. If you click it again, it goes to a slightly lower accent value, and then click it again and it turns it off. Pretty simple step sequencer stuff. So you can program your notes in, and you'll also notice again another piece of homage to the Fairlight. These little cones at the bottom here that raise up as the beats go past. So we've got a play control at the top. Okay, we can stop that, and we can also do that directly from the keyboard. As you can see, this red note here signifies C3, and if I hit the note on my controller here, it starts the pattern and carries it on until I let go. And then the samples themselves are all located down here, so I can audition those. And there you go. So, and that's essentially it. Now you get about 25 presets, and these have all been created by UVI, so you can just call those up and they're instantly in, because it's a one-off load. All the samples are in memory straight away, so that makes it quite nice. Clearly a very 80s Fairlight type sound there, and let's play a few more of those. And you get the idea. So I'll come on to the number of presets as we wrap up the review, but there's 25 to choose from there, and that's it really. That's the page B function. So let's go and have a look now at page U, which is the pattern and phrase sequencer. Again, if you're familiar with UVI's products and you've watched the videos that I've done before, this is nothing new. Basically, it's 3 step sequences, and each of those can have a voice assigned to them. As you can see, there's a lot of stuff. So you can go through and assign any of those voices to that one, and then you can assign another load to this one. And what you're doing here is you're assigning these voices, and then each of these steps is a trigger to trigger that particular voice. So it's essentially a 16-step arpeggiation. And if you set the volume control, so like that rather than that, then things can glide nicely. And we've got separate volume and pan controls here. We've got different resolutions, so you can go right up to 132 there. I haven't got my glasses on. And you've got gate controls, and you can control the amount of steps as well. And you can move between octaves quite quickly there. And you can do that for each of these notes, and you can turn them on, off, mute them, and what have you. And you can even draw this stuff in. Now, when I was playing with this, I thought, oh, that's clever, because, you know, that was one thing that the Fairlight was always known for. You know, the light pen, you could draw stuff in. Well, this hasn't been done because of that, because this ability has always existed within UVI Workstation. Whichever library you're using, you can do this. But I thought, oh, that's kind of clever how it now actually ties in with that and makes it kind of a bit more authentic. Once again, we have some presets over here. We'll go through those in just a second, but also just to remind you that over here on the right hand side we have effects, delay and reverb, and filter control for each of the separate lanes, so we can affect each one. So we can choose one of the presets, and then these are chromatically playable across the keyboard. So and there's some really nice ones in here, some drone type sounds. And as I said near the beginning of the video, that I like this particular function because it allows you to just mess around and come up with something creative. And actually what I found myself doing is, you know, messing around with this and getting a nice little sequence going, and then just having that running continuously in the background, and then compose on top of that. And that's the way I like to use it anyway. And one of the things that the Fairlight brought to the music world was this kind of very rigid timing, and the songs of the day was very much influenced by the sequencing capabilities of the Fairlight. So not only did things sound slightly different in terms of the tones that we used, but things started to sound different because of the way the music was being programmed. And so there was a massive amount of music out there that shares the Fairlight DNA, and you know that, but when you listen to it, you can hear that just sounds like the sequencing from a Fairlight, as well as the sounds from a Fairlight as well. And of course the Fairlight could trigger external instruments over MIDI as well in later versions. So there you go, that's page U, and we've pretty much completed the tour of the instrument. So let's summarize. What we have here is a pretty extensive sample library. There's over 250 instruments in the instrument section alone, and then there's all those percussive samples and other voices that we see here in the phrase sequencer. Looks wise, well, it goes 10 out of 10 again for UVI, who come up consistently with really good looking interfaces. They don't copy directly, but they certainly make it unmistakable as to what this machine is. If you remember, the Emulation 2 library looks very, very much like the front panel of an emulator. Darklight here obviously apes the Fairlight very well. It's not an exact replication, but it's enough to make it memorable. The quality of the sounds, again, UVI have gone over and above when it comes to sampling. The sampling is very good, the mastering of the samples is great, and the quality of the patches provided, again, very, very good indeed. Coming on to the patches, well, again, I've got to pick UVI up on this. There are not a huge amount of presets. Now, that might be a good thing, it might be a bad thing. I know a lot of people who very rarely touch the presets. They simply just like to get in there and start tinkering away themselves. Other people I know love presets and they love to have lots of them. So if you're one of those people, then you've got over 250 instruments, which is, I think, a fair amount. But when it comes to the page B and page U applications, there's only 25 for each one, and I think that there could have been more, in my opinion. But it's it's not a deal breaker by any stretch of the imagination, because it is very simple to create your own. So overall, what do I think, and what does it compare to? Is there anything else there out on the market? Well, I think this certainly satisfies a hole in the market for really good Fairlight sounds for people that use workstations that rely on VST audio units and RTAS plugins, because there really is nothing quite like this in that arena at the moment. There is one other sample library out there, and that is the incredibly good Bitly Fairlight sample library, which is made by a friend of mine called Patrick from Sweden, and he's done an exceptional job on that particular library, and it is massive. It really is. There are so many patches in there, and he's also thrown in other instruments as well, so that the current version, Fairlight Platinum, is a massive tool to use in Reason. But that's it. It can only be used in Reason. Now, there is a Contact version that's kind of an ongoing project where Patrick has reached out to the Contact community and said, if you can give me some help to create some patches, we'll do it. And it's nowhere near as extensive as the Reason library, and I don't think it's as extensive as this one. So Patrick's library is up there in a league of its own, and for people like me who use Reason on a regular basis, it's the refill I pretty much open up first time every time, and I know a lot of people that do the same. So does Darklight compare to that? Well, in terms of quality, yes. In terms of quantity, no, but that's, again, not a major problem. And Darklight addresses a completely different market. It addresses a market where before, if you wanted those sounds from Patrick's library, you'd have to own a copy of Reason and then rewire it in to your DAW of choice, be it Logic or Cubase or Sonar or whatever. So Darklight really is, I would say, the premium Fairlight-based sample library for everything that isn't Reason, and it's done a really good job there as well. So that's my opinion. I think it's a great library. It's not, as some people initially believed, a Fairlight replicated in software, because, as I said before, without serious extra DSP hardware, that just isn't possible at this moment in time. And if you want a real Fairlight, then you're going to have to go and buy one, and you can pick up a second-hand Series 2 or Series 3 for anything between, say, £4,000 and £6,000, maybe £8,000. That's British pounds. You can occasionally pick one up a little bit cheaper, but not much. Or you can spend 20,000 Australian dollars and place an order for a CMI 30A if the 100 of them haven't already gone. So this means that if you really want the real deal, you're going to have to spend a lot of money, not only to buy it, but certainly in the case of the second-hand instruments, you're going to have a lot of money to keep it going, because these machines are getting old, and there aren't many people out there that can fix and repair them. So bear that in mind. If that's what you want, you're going to have to pay for it. Otherwise, this is a really good compromise, because it's a lot cheaper. This library is about $200, or $199, and will, I think, satisfy the needs of most people who want that Fairlight sound. So there you go. I wholeheartedly approve of this one. I hope you've enjoyed the review, and I hope you then go to the failedmuso.com website and go and check out the blog, where you'll find the full written review along with lots of audio samples of this particular device, proper tunes played by people who can play the keyboards properly, and you'll also find some other material there telling you all about it, and all my other reviews are up on there. So it's www.failedmuso.com. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye bye.